Welcome to the Boardroom Sessions podcast. In these sessions, we meet the most amazing and interesting people. We learn about their passions, their business models, cool new technologies, and of course, their lessons on personal growth. I hope you enjoy. In this Boardroom Sessions podcast, we dive deep into social media. Why should the enterprise care about social media? We meet Tyler Altrup, an expert on social media marketing tools, engagement tools with a company called Sprinkler. Hope you very much enjoy. Tyler Altrup, welcome to the Boardroom Sessions podcast.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
And so, Tyler, you're in social media business. You work for a company called Sprinkler. That's correct?
I do indeed.
And we know Sprinkler, I know Sprinkler, and I wanted to make sure I introduced the concept of social media and why the enterprise should care about social media to the audience here today on the Boardroom Session. So I'm very excited to have this conversation here. Real quick, in looking at your background and talking with you, you actually had a role in marketing with Dell EMC back in the early days of social, and they were an adopter. So tell me about your experience when you were at Dell/EMC.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that goes all the way back to 2010. And if you're talking to folks that say they've been in social media longer than about 2010, I'd be curious what they were up to. That was really the beginning when corporations got access to a lot of these channels, when Facebook wasn't just for college kids anymore. And it prompted a lot of us to try and figure out, what do we do with this? Like, what does it mean for a brand to establish presence, to engage, to use it to support all kinds of different marketing efforts and to talk to folks? So it was an incredible experience for a lot of us with a lot of other skills trying to figure out what that looks like on a completely new medium. Yep.
And so I get the question asked fairly regularly from my clients. Why should the enterprise care about social media, right? They're spending money trying to find clients or connect with their customers, or maybe they don't have end customers like a consumer type customer. Maybe it's a business to business play. And when I'm talking with certain individuals that are, my typical contacts in IT, in operations, and even in marketing, sometimes they're unaware of the use cases to utilize a marketing platform that targets social media. And I have kids. I think I know how important it is. And now with several client engagements where we've been working together, I've seen Sprinkler at work. And so I want to tell folks, in your words, why should the enterprise care about social media?
Yeah, well, and this was so much of that conversation even back, 2010, 2011, 2012, when we were trying to figure out how to explain exactly that to a group of really experienced marketers all over our own organization, all the way up to marketing leadership and our CMO back then. And especially in a B2B business, how do you explain why Facebook matters to, an EMC business that's selling data storage? So we got comfortable telling this story in a hurry, and I had some fantastic mentors that I'll name drop really quickly. But it was Len Devana, it was Tom Lytle. I've stayed in touch with both of them, and they're wonderful. And for the way that they set the table on a lot of this is it's just a new avenue to execute a lot of your smart strategies you're already doing. And then the thing that made it unique is that it's a different opportunity to build a relationship. So it's a chance to go be authentic and establish, conversations and relationships with customers one-on-one. But if I try and put it into, three big categories, part of it is about establishing the brand. It's taking the voice and the way that you want to represent the brand and just doing it in a new space with, new audiences. And part of it, and one thing that I would say is particularly interesting and a big focus for Sprinkler right now, is recruiting. We're growing in a hurry. So the way that you represent yourself as a brand, not just, posting your jobs on LinkedIn, the things you might think of when I say recruiting, but the voice you have, like the way that you talk to customers, the way that you solve issues, your customers and your potential, recruits are going to see all of that.
And so with post-COVID, hiring is a very big challenge right now. Believe it or not, right. You would think it wouldn't be. You'd think there'd be a lot of people that are looking for work, but apparently according to my clients, there's definitely an issue in finding the right people for the right job. And so long time success formula has been to go to your own employees and have your employees go to their network and find people, or at least put the word out that they're looking, right? So with your platform, you can actually encourage the employees and make it very easy for them to then just blast, right, to their folks or to their network.
Yeah, that's right. And it's, it's certainly something that we do a lot ourselves. And I do think sometimes, the way that you teed it up to me is a brand might say like, hey, everyone, if you love working here, please go tell folks, like make us, appear as the wonderful place that we are to work. But have you given them more direction than that? Like, have you helped make it a little easier so that you're not creating some burden and asking folks to become creative writers? Like, can we give them ideas of different things that we're focused on and make it easiasier for them to go amplify that? So
you can create a marketing post. You can create a marketing post with visual aid, with whatever pretty click through to a link to an application post to whatever you want, and make it real easy for them to just put that in their own Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and have that shot out there, right?
That's right. And behind so many of these things, it's what is your content engine going to look like? And again, kind of regardless of tool set and regardless of strategy, could be advocacy, to your point. We could be talking about marketing strategies, about advertising. Like, how are you going to create a big set of compelling messages, compelling creative, so that people are going to pay attention for whatever you're focused on?
Right. You were mentioning brand and brand reputation management, right? And so I have an example that I've used. I may have used it on this podcast before, but I learned now the term is called at blasting. But I during COVID was refinancing a property and had a challenge with a bank, and the bank is called PNC Bank, by the way. And I was having a big challenge, getting a hold of the right people to have the right decision made. And I went on to Twitter. I had to actually go and renew my password because I hadn't been on Twitter in years. And I renewed the password, got on Twitter, put at PNC Bank so that their company popped up, and said a whole bunch of negative things, and just hoped that negative sentiment would be engaged and somebody would find it and have a tool like yours. And they did, because 20 minutes later, I had an email in my email address folder from PNC Bank VP asking to, sorry about your experience. How can I help? And so that works. I mean, I've heard those stories about the airlines and people using Twitter to get a hold of somebody in customer care. And so that's an indicator that people are listening. That's an indicator that that was a good experience for me because I got my stuff handled. So companies don't know what's being said about them on social, or it could be anecdotal, or it could be one at a time. It's not a whole scenario, right? So brand management, both positive and negative, is very important. You can then engage, right? Your tool then has the ability to interface with a CRM or whatever a ticketing system people are using that could route that at blast that I used in the example to somebody in an office that then can interact. They can say, hey, I'm sorry, Mike, you had a bad problem. Or they can say, hey, Mike, I'm glad you gave us the 5-star review. We'd like to add you to our loyalty program or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. It's exactly right. And we didn't talk at the very opening about my role at Sprinkler, but I've been a solution consultant for a long time here and elsewhere. And now I lead our solutions team in the Northwest Americas. And so we talk all the time about focusing on a customer experience and a customer journey. And that example you just shared about your PNC experience, we talk about that kind of example an awful lot.
Yeah.
Because think about just that one moment and all the different things that multiple companies could do when they see that message. So hopefully PNC sees it, and then they route that for care. And they try and get the right information, figure out who you are beyond your Twitter handle so that they can work with you, solve the problem, help you have a better experience. But now play that out if I'm a different bank. What if I'm Wells? What if I'm Chase and I see that message? Maybe there's an opportunity there, because if who you're working with right now isn't taking care of you, maybe we can. And maybe that's a chance to build a new relationship with you as a new customer. So it's the way that those experiences show up in so many different ways, in so many different places. And what that little moment means, that little message could be for that brand and all their competitors and their industry and others. There's so many ways to approach it. And a lot of our conversations are just trying to help folks understand all those possibilities, because it's obvious what that is for PNC. But what it is for a competitor, what it is for folks that might be competing for their talent, it can mean lots of things to lots of folks.
Yep. You guys also have a topic called mass one-on-one. What do you mean? What to bring the users up to, or the listeners up to speed on what that means?
Yeah, this is one of those things that I'm sure if you're listening to this, it sounds like jargon or an old cliche. But we're continually trying to find ways to deliver a one-on-one experience at scale. Now, we've all been talking about this since social media existed. But I think in a lot of ways, it's look at the kind of experience that you as a brand deliver today. Like if you're a retailer, you probably have folks walking around a show floor trying to help people out. Like, what does that look like online? Like, what does that look like in WhatsApp? What does it look like in Messenger? And so we're constantly working with folks to figure out, like, what is the best type of experience you're trying to deliver? How do you do that today in different places? How can we translate that to all of these modern and emerging channels so that we can make sure that the brand is representing itself consistently everywhere in every interaction? Now, part of that is really good training and coaching from, service and marketing organizations. But what I think is really interesting is we're also starting to see that transition from not just a care conversation, but to a commerce conversation. You're going to start seeing a lot of these channels, especially folks like Instagram and WhatsApp and others, moving really heavily into commerce and purchase conversations in messages, not just, solving your negative mortgage experience, but actually going through and helping you identify the right mortgage product and giving you information about it and trying to get you to bite off and sign on the line for those kinds of things. So, these things we might have thought about as more care focused are about to change in a pretty significant way.
I'm sure they are. You brought up the whole Google piece, right? So many companies, most of my clients are using Google paid ad search, right? For various terms and various things that they're looking to get paid advertisement to Google. And then therefore, when that ad pops up, you're typically prodded to make a phone call, right? And so that's kind of old school today, right? Today, people don't want, not all people want to make a phone call. Some people want to engage right away or multitask or what have you, right? Or engage on the platform. I call it meet the client where the client's at, right? So
that's right.
Most of the time they're calling from a cell phone, a mobile device, right? Or a tablet or something like that. And so you got to make it easy for them. So one of the things I've seen Sprinkler be able to do is in that Google ad, you're able to put in a message icon, right? So that my choice now is I can then start an instant conversation with somebody at that company and not have to pick up the phone and make a phone call.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is, part of what's fun at working like a place like Sprinkler is we get pushed by our clients and we get to innovate with our partners. So, those conversations with Google have been happening for quite a long time. And we get to continue to have those conversations with Google, with everybody in the Facebook family, with really close relationships at Twitter and Reddit and everywhere else. And they're all thinking about where they want to take their platforms and the kind of experiences they want to deliver. And then we get to have the conversation with them about how can we, as a technology provider, facilitate that. So we're constantly pushing each other to innovate. Our customers are pushing both of us. And it gives us great opportunities just to find, an example like the one you shared and say, sure, we want to make it easy for folks to find the phone number, but what if they don't want to? Like, what if they would rather send us a message? What if they call and we tell them, hey, if you're calling about this, tap 2 and we'll just send you a message and solve it even faster. So whatever that flow needs to look like for whatever experience a customer wants, it's finding different ways to facilitate it. And then however they reach out over time, making sure whoever's on the other end always understands who that customer is, the issue they're having, the experience they've had with us before, so that we're always delivering kind of an informed response.
Yeah. And it's changing. Things are just very much quickly changing in this environment, right, today. Some of it has to do with the age, I believe, right? I think that there's definitely generational learning and where people want to be, where they want to communicate, right? Who's more comfortable communicating. And so that seems to be part of the issue when I'm with my clients is, for one, I'll own my own self. I'm very, very rarely on social media, right? I'm on a little bit of LinkedIn. Yeah, I know. I'm on a little bit of LinkedIn, maybe a little more than a little bit, but I'm on LinkedIn because it's the professional connection and I have a large network. And so that's one way in which we network with each other. A little bit of Instagram to keep up with my buddies, and that's about it, right? Yeah. However, I know enough to know that Instagram is incredibly good at advertising, right?
They sure are.
So those advertisements get better and better the more I'm on Instagram, and they're more compelling to the point where I can't believe I'm seeing this advertisement. That has got to be the coolest thing ever. And I'm clicking right through to it, sharing it with my buddies. So it's very good. And my experience is my kids think the same way. My wife thinks the same way about Instagram. And so it has to be a very profitable tool for those that use it.
Yeah, it does. And listen, this is common. So, you tell me you're not a person that spends a lot of time on Instagram. That's all right. And it's the case for a lot of us, even if you're really active on social media, like personal preference, channels of choice for me. I spend way too much time on Twitter. And my evening treat to try and wind down and get a laugh at the end of the day is I love TikTok. But it's different for everybody. And I think for those that might be listening to this, I would just encourage you to keep an open mind. Like, it's not about the channel that you love or the people that love or are spending time on. There's different ways that we can engage in each of these. There's ways that each of these channels and audiences could be a part of a bigger strategy that you're focused on. And so it's keeping an open mind. It's looking at who's innovating, taking examples from others, even beyond your own industry, and seeing how that might translate. And it's testing. Like, experiment, have a hypothesis. Sometimes it might be wrong. That's okay. But it's continuing to try and explore new things and not getting stuck in what might feel most comfortable.
Yeah. The reason why I first had conversations with Sprinkler was around listening, right? I had clients that wanted to know. They wanted to know what's going on in their industry, not just from their own perspective, but what others were saying about their competitors, about the landscape, about rankings. So tell me about listening, because that's what I think you're known for. That's what Sprinkler comes to the mind with.
Yeah, this is so exciting. And I think a listening conversation, especially when you're talking about the technology, this can get weedsy quick. And so, when I have this conversation with clients, I like to start it really simply. And back in the days, we could see each other in person. I'd get up and do this on a whiteboard, probably 5 minutes into a meeting, and just draw 2 questions on the board. And it's, what are you trying to learn or understand? And if you knew, what would you do about it? And that's it. Like, before we get into a conversation about how many websites we can scan and how many networks we support and the AI we use to enrich it, and those are all compelling conversations as well. But what are we trying to understand? And if you knew, what would you do? And that, I think that can take down some barriers where folks might be intimidated about understanding the technology and what's possible, and can better focus them on just having a business conversation with me. And let me bring you the tools and show you how the tool aligns to what you're trying to do. And then we can go down that road. But it's so much better to just start with that in mind. And this is another one of those things when we think about channels that I encourage folks to think broadly. Because, if you and I were having this conversation a year ago, I bet neither one of us would know a lot about the Wall Street Bets subreddit. And what that means and why it's making national news. And we're talking about GameStop stock, an incredibly struggling business.
Yeah, why don't you tell that story? Tell that story from the beginning, because I don't know that everybody was aware of that as it went down.
Yeah, so I think Reddit is one of those places that folks that are very active are very loyal to the platform. They love it. And I think it's actually part of a bigger trend that's a separate tangent about what is a brand's point of view on having an owned community space versus participating elsewhere. Because I think forever we all stood up our own communities and said, we're going to have our own, we're going to gate it, we're going to control it, we're going to dictate what happens there. And over time, I think there's been a big transition into a more hybrid model where some folks that's still really appropriate. But for a lot of folks, it's finding ways to engage in these forums they don't own. And Reddit's such a great example. So, for those that might not be as aware, the investor community on Reddit has become one of the most active, parts of the site. And there's some very active investors that took a look at the GameStop stock and saw an opportunity to realize a return, to mess with some hedge funds along the way. And it became a bit of a cultural moment that people were not only participating for the return, but there was some pride to be a part of that community that was doing this thing and making news and achieving this incredible outcome. And so, it's an example of the kind of place that you can watch. And we do now have a lot of, financial services, financial technology, and banking clients that are realizing how important it is to have an awareness of what's going on in those spaces, to better understand how that might impact their own portfolios, and understand if they're the next GameStop that might get targeted for that kind of more activist activity.
And be able to react quickly, right? Because that went down like wildfire. I think the term in the social world is viral, right? So it went viral and it went quick. And if you don't have the ability to know what's going on, you're going to read about your own company and some problem going on in the news. And that's the last place you want to read about it. You want to hear about it early, so you can react to it and take advantage of it, right?
That's right.
Or put a fire out if that's the case, right? But
that's right. It doesn't always mean that there's an obvious next action for you to take. But we're going to give you the information. We're going to give you a chance to decide. Like, is this a moment I belong with? Is it not? And on the opposite side of it, we've had an awful lot of, socio-political moments over the last year or two. And those are moments as well where we work really closely with clients to help them understand what's happening. Are they connected to it? And then what does it mean? Maybe that's a moment where the brand just needs to be quiet, and let that moment happen before they try to inject themselves in it. So it's back to those two simple questions. Like, what are you trying to understand? And if you knew, what would you like to do about it?
Right. And one of the logical things you could do, let's say positive sentiment. So somebody's saying something really good about your brand, right?
That's right.
You can choose to take a subset, all of some individuals, go handpick whatever you want. You can do that and have those messages routed into a contact center and have somebody reach back out and say something nice to them or add them to the club or appreciate it or what have you. Same thing with negative. If you choose to react to negative sentiments, if somebody's out there gives you a 1-star review on some platform, like a Yelp or what you name it, you can react to that. You can then say, hey, sorry to hear about your 1-star experience. How can I make that a better experience? Like we talked about the app blasting, right? That was a version of the negative sentiment engagement.
Yeah. And you can imagine as part of my role, Mike, a lot of this is, navigating folks with different priorities, different strategies, and trying to understand what they're looking for and working with them to understand what's possible and navigating. So that doesn't involve a lot of hot takes, but I'm going to give you one. Social on an island doesn't work. It just doesn't. I think there was a time that, as this thing was first emerging, we thought, okay, even within a marketing organization, we have our PR and comms team, we have our analyst and investor relations teams, we have our lead generation teams, and maybe our media team. And then we have our social team that sits over here. But what's happened over time and what's been so fascinating to watch over the last 10 years is it's a part of every single function within an organization. And that's wonderful. That's fantastic. There's a role for risk and governance to, look at this data and look at these channels for marketing, for advertising, for care, and so on. But where we start seeing folks take a meaningful step forward is not just thinking of the role this plays in all those groups, but how does it cross those lines? And you just gave such a great example, which is, maybe you have a business intelligence team or a research team that's looking at this conversation broadly. And when you find one of those positive moments you want to amplify, how do you turn that into marketing content? How do you turn that into an advertising campaign? How do you take somebody having a real experience with your brand and amplify it? And that requires, sharing this data and collaborating around all these moments so that everybody knows what that experience is, because it's what our customers are now starting to expect more consistently.
Yes, for sure. One of the benefits that the client can get with all of this is there's a lot to it. And they may not be able to react to everybody if you're a C type of client. You guys have a heavy AI integration, and you've won some very large companies that have their own AI, right?
Yeah.
One that makes telephones, for example, mobile phone devices that we all are all familiar with, that have chosen to use your AI for some of their flow here. So tell us what goes on in the overused terminology of artificial intelligence.
Well, let me tell you what we don't do. We don't make robots. We are not Boston Dynamics. It is overused. And unfortunately, the term and the idea has become watered down because so many folks that want to have an AI conversation, what they're really talking about is automation. And automation is critical, plays a huge role in everything that we've been talking about so far. But when we start talking about machine learning and AI strategy, I would really encourage folks listening to this that are looking for partners, services, technologies, make sure you ask how. What does it do? How does it do it? How did you train and build it? An enormous credit to our product team. I almost wish a couple of them could have joined us because they've been investing in this for years. And what we really realized, I think the light bulb moment is that, AI relies on data. You have to feed these models more data. You have to tune it. You have to annotate. You have to tag it to teach it how to understand things. And what's so unique about social and digital space and all these things that we capture and monitor is it's an enormous amount of data. We're at a point where we're doing 5 to 10 billion predictions a day based on all the data that our customers are ingesting. And what that means is, if we think about data coming in, we can classify it, we can enrich it, we can tell you about emotion and theme and tone and even what journey stage we think a customer might be in based on what we recognize in the message. And then when it looks at the things going out, it's even being able to coach a care agent on the likely best response for that moment. So there are so many different use cases where we've applied it. And just like I gave you my hot take that social shouldn't be on an island, AI shouldn't either. It should be thinking about how can we use these strategies to improve our techniques in all of the different functions where we have access to this data. And you're right, we do support actually many phone manufacturers. And they do all kinds of things from better classifying the messages that are coming in, experiences that folks are having, and incorporate that even into QA processes. So there's all kinds of ways we can apply it. If I can give you one more story, Mike, one of our clients that manages a lot of online bookings for travel, they were really struggling with a few things. Really negative groups that were using their properties for rallies that they wanted nothing to do with. So talk about brand risk in a major way. And another is, they have just as much interest in protecting the folks listing their properties as they do in the folks renting them. And so how do we make sure that's not turning into huge parties? And we found all of this with a lot of visual search, with a lot of AI modeling, detecting things like objects and images. This is where these things get weedsy. But I'll tell you where that conversation started was them saying, we've got a challenge. We work with you in all these other areas. Is there anything you could do for us here?
Right.
So it's building enough trust and credibility with them that the folks you're working with start bringing you problems they're not even sure you can solve.
Right. One of the use cases that a client is using it for, their manufacturer, and they're looking at real-time information based on inquiries, based on messages that are being sent, conversations that are had between people around products that are hot. Because if they're hot, they need to bump up production, and they are trying to run as lean as possible and keep their production times down and all that kind of stuff. So they can see the actual name of their product being utilized pretty regularly, and then they're like, "Uh-oh, we got to ramp things up."
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we had a client challenge us about 4 years ago to say, "Can you tell us if a message is engageable or not?" Now, for folks that don't play in a social media space, engageable might sound like a nonsense word. It kind of is. But what we're trying to assess is this thing noise or nonsense, or is this worth me analyzing, replying to, deciding whether this looks like care or a potential piece of UGC, user-generated content, or something else. And so we took on that challenge, and now that's deployed for almost everybody that we work with. And what we see is that in most cases of the things you're looking for about your brand, usually 80% or more is nonsense that you shouldn't be paying attention to. And if you think about what that means for the brand, it means instead of spending all their time scanning through stuff, trying to find moments to meaningfully engage, skip that step. Now you get to decide how to engage, where to engage, in what way you want to engage. But you skipped something where AI can help us. And so we look for those moments all over the place to take things that aren't valuable uses of your trained, talented team's time and see if we can help you take that off the table.
Yeah. One of the things that I know that's happening now is that the call center is changing, right? Not just because people aren't calling or not wanting to call, if you will. They're calling more than ever in a lot of cases. However, I think there's other opportunities for engagement. But the challenge is the call center is very complicated, has a lot of moving parts to it in an enterprise. There's a lot to it and a lot of functionality in there. But there are new needs that are coming faster than the call center manufacturers are able to deliver, right? They're not able to go and integrate with a Google and have a Google chat bot, then go to their chat, et cetera, and many other things. But Sprinklr is adapting and Sprinklr is moving into that space. And so tell me what the thought process is and what we might be able to see in the future.
Yeah, I mean, to be simple about it, if you need care, we want to help facilitate it. There's always going to be a role for voice. I don't want any of what I'm about to say to sound like there's not a role for voice. There is. But do we need to get somebody on the phone that's trying to reset their password? Probably not. So it's finding some of those simpler moments that we can deflect, because when we get on the phone with somebody, your average cost of care just went up. And so if that's something that we can solve in a more automated response, if that's something that we can solve for with key messages, we want to do all of that. And again, we treat every channel the same. So if it comes in as a call, as a message, as a comment in a forum, we want to route those to the folks that have the specialty, so that instead of dividing ourselves up by what channel you might have reached out on, we can better focus on specialization, expertise, time to best response and time to resolution. So everything that we're focused on, I think, is aligned to using AI, automation, and broad channel support to try and solve for things that way. And if I throw you again, Mike, one of the more advanced things, it's now, can I take all those folks that have come in and they've been upset, and I've automatically used our AI models to classify it that way? Well, does our advertising team know? Or are they launching a huge campaign at a bunch of folks that are really upset with us right now? Because there's a really good chance that that's probably not the best use of my dollars.
Yeah.
So it comes back to those examples, like how do I take things I'm doing in different parts of the business and make sure other folks that could benefit from that intelligence have it easily?
Yeah. Those are some of the afterthoughts or side thoughts that people are trying to solve for in other ways in marketing, right? So there's a lot of platforms. There's a lot of innovation going on in the marketing platform space today. But I have found that Sprinklr has a wide portfolio and many more of the tools available than folks think that they are, right? Including some of that modeling tool, right? So if folks want to know where they stand, you started with, what do you want to know and how do you want to engage, right? That kind of thought process. People are looking at, what do we want to know about our company? What do we want to know about our competition? What do we want to do at that point? How do we want to change our presence in the market? You give them a baseline of all of that. As a matter of fact, I've asked Sprinklr to pull some information on a client, and it takes you no time at all. And you pop out a competitive analysis of how they rank, stack, and who's talking about your company.
Yeah, well, and part of what, as you might imagine, makes it fun to be in a solutions role here is that I not only get a chance to talk about what's possible and what we can do, because so much of the data that we process is public, I get to play with the data and your data in order to show you what we're capable of. And so exactly to your point, I got an opportunity. I love playing video games, and I get the chance to work with a lot of our gaming clients, and we've got an AI model specific to gaming. And so when we put that together and I get an idea, or I see somebody that has a really just catastrophic launch, I can go run that analysis and take something that might have showed up on an Amazon page as a 5-paragraph review. And I can tell you in the moment that I derived automatically, 6, 7, 8 specific insights about 5 different product attributes. And that when I pull that out at scale, I captured, let's say 20, 30,000 reviews in that launch week. I learned these 2,000 things from it. And here are the 5 attributes that your customers are the most upset about. And I did no work to do that. I just said, hey, model, go take a look at this. Look at all the attributes for this specific industry and tell me what you found. And then I get to synthesize that into a story that I get to talk to that client about. And so it's exciting to be able to do it. I think, not only doing that, but then looking at their competitor and telling them a little bit about that as well. So there's so much data here that, starting with a starting point in mind, an idea, something you're trying to solve for, using all the technology we have to distill it down, and then translating that into all the different decisions they should make based on what we've uncovered.
Yeah. And that's a lot of decision making on the client, but the bottom line is you're giving them the information real time of what people are doing and saying and how to interact with them, right? And
that's right. And one of my teammates in Tokyo, Tracy Zhang, she came up with this approach that we would put the review on the screen and just talk through it together and say, here's one review. Now read this with me and tell me what you understood. And you take a couple minutes and you read through it and you tell me what stood out to you. And it's such a great example because it says like, okay, now you've got 1 million reviews in the last year. Do that times 1 million. And it's such a simple example, but it really brings to life, like, why are we doing this? Like, we're not doing AI because it's a buzzword. We're doing AI because it allows us to find critical insight faster and then focus more on what we're going to do next.
People are spending a lot of time and effort on initiatives like RPA and ML and all kinds of other stuff that they're doing throughout the enterprise to speed up the process, right? Automation. So now you're able to automate the client engagement, which is valuable, right? If I can't get a hold of somebody, I'm going to the next line on the search, right? That's it. You're going to click on the next, and that's what everybody does. So there's no arguing the value of being able to have an immediate engagement with the client.
Yeah, that's right. And not everything we're doing is, selling widgets. We've had an opportunity over the last year to work with a couple of NGOs on a global scale that were trying to understand the conversation around COVID and what was going on with the pandemic and better, more proactively provide information to folks for what they're looking for. And, as we got started, it was, how is this transmitted, and transitioned into, what's the right kind of PPE to protect yourself and your family. And then it transitioned into information about vaccines and care. And so at every stage along the way, they've been able to use some of those automated conversational approaches to push that information out to folks that are looking for it, to take questions that people have and understand those trends and how people were talking about this all over the globe. So, a lot of the time we're helping folks drive revenue or minimize risk, but to get to work with a couple of organizations with that kind of mission was great. It was a great moment from the last year.
Yeah. And I'm finding, although some folks are unaware of some of the use cases, it's it doesn't matter whether you're B2C, if you're trying to find clients out there to buy your product with a click through, right? It could also be the enterprise that is business to business, right? They want to know information. They're gathering information. They're looking at competitive intelligence to see if you're the company they want to engage with or if it's your competitor. So there's a lot of opportunity there, not only just for brand management. We talked about recruiting as another opportunity. We talked about staying in touch with the entire world, if you will, of social. It's what people are saying out there about you and your company or your industry, right? So there's a lot of different ways in which a traditional brick and mortar business to business enterprise needs to worry and think about social. Right.
That's right. And you shared the example earlier, Mike, of, going to a social channel and basically raising your red flag. Like, I'm here, I need help. I'm going to be a little noisy and I'm going to see who comes help. Yeah. We see that in so many ways in some places that are frankly organizational blind spots. And I'm going to give you one more example. Like, a lot of social advertising teams have become extremely sophisticated. And so they run these enormous campaigns. Their targeting is great. Their optimization is great. Maybe they're using an AI like ours to even enhance those bids, and placements, and channel strategies. But then somebody leaves a comment because maybe instead of going to Twitter that day to drop your complaint, you saw an ad from them. And you find yourself thinking, an advertisement, like I can't even get these guys to reply to my email. And so it's
that's bad etiquette, right?
That's right. But then is the advertising team responsible for care? No, they're not. But are they sharing that information? Are they sharing a view of the customer? Because our customers don't care how our businesses are organized, and they're never going to. So they don't care that the advertising team isn't responsible for care. They just need care. And so better unifying and collaborating across all these different functions helps us represent ourselves to our customers as one thing, rather than deciding or trying to capture that screenshot, put it in a spreadsheet, or send it in an email to your teammate that you might know on the other side to hopefully help solve the problem.
Yeah. Those are all some great things going on here in social. And who would think, that's the reason why we're having the podcast here today, is I've had more than a couple conversations where people are like, social, does my company that, does something completely off of the internet have anything to do with social media? And, there's just so many things going on right now that I couldn't wait to have this conversation.
Well, I'm going to pick on my old friends at EMC and say, if social media is relevant for data storage, it's probably relevant.
Data storage. Right. I mean, spinning disks are still a thing, right? And flash arrays. So, people still have to store data, and, EMC still making billions of dollars a year, doing what they're doing.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. That's right.
And so what's next for Sprinklr? Where do you see this platform? For me, I see it growing. I see a lot of different features and functions and tools and cross-departmental opportunities throughout the enterprise. What are you seeing?
I think two things. One is, I think we need to continue to evangelize. I think a lot of the things that we've even talked about today, some folks listening to this might not know were possible. And that's our responsibility. Like we've got to go help folks continue to understand that you can unify more of your understanding of your customer. I think for a long time we did that with CRM. Like CRM is great. Like there's a role for CRM forever in understanding, how are they engaged? What have they bought? When did they buy it? When are they renewing? But there's this completely different thing that we call CXM, the customer experience part of the story. And those things need to play together. Because when I'm engaging here, I need to know what they bought and the relationship they have with me, maybe the issue they had last time, so I don't go give them the same answer and give them a terrible experience. But how do these things continue to play together? And that's on us. We need to continue to tell that story and help folks understand that it's possible. And then we've got to prove that we can help them do it. And that's part of my day job I really enjoy. And I think the other part is we've talked about a lot of different things that AI can do. I hope you don't get too sick of that phrase and those two letters, because they're not going away. For us today, we use it in so many ways. We use it to help with automation. We use it to enrich the data coming in and out of our organizations. We use it to better classify everything we know about a customer, we know about a message or a post. But where I think this going forward is where this goes forward, which is essentially thinking about trends. Like we're very good at helping customers understand the moment they're in. How can we do a better job of helping them understand where something is going before it happens?
Right, like the manufacturer example I used. Right, when there's a buzz, right. like the viral investing event that went down with GameStop. Right, we talked about that.
Just diamond hands, Mike. Hold, taking it to the moon.
Yes.
We've got a whole group of folks internally that are super passionate about all that stuff, constantly making all of those jokes. So yeah, we're helping folks understand where things are going. And I think the other part is we're starting to see, I would say, at least a couple leaders in each of the industries we support that are really attaching themselves to this, of the cross-functional possibilities of the way that different parts of the organization can help each other. So we're thinking about trends, and there was a recent article actually, and now we were not responsible for this, let me make that clear. Also, hashtag not a sponsor. But there was a recent article about Netflix that I thought was super compelling, because for those of you that might have watched Queen's Gambit while we were all stuck at home.
Great series.
Incredible show. So interesting. The visual is stuck with me of the chessboard on the ceiling. But they did some really smart research apparently that helped them understand that because we're all stuck at home, because we're playing board games and doing puzzles, that kind of content and show was going to hit especially well. And so they really invested in promoting it and pushing it and driving subscriptions and retention with it. And it was a huge success for them. And so I think a lot of folks are going to be hungry to try and figure out, just like the fashion industry's been for a century, like, where's this going next? How do I make sure I'm there before it happens, so that I don't get left behind?
Sure.
So
and if I were
for us to play with that,
if I were a game board manufacturer making chess boards, I might want to ramp up production and start a marketing campaign behind it, right? So there's
heck, even if you're the local game shop down the street, it'd be great to have that kind of intelligence. So there's a role for us to play in that, and it's exciting. I mean, it's also just we're going through a lot of growth right now, and what's been exciting about that for us is we're bringing in so many new points of view. Because I've been chewing on this for 10 years and I've been doing it at Sprinkler for 4. I think I've got a couple of good ideas, but we get all these new folks come in and they look at it in a completely different way. And so having a lot of those discussions, like figuring out how we can position this, that the problems we can solve that customers aren't even asking us to solve yet, and the way that we can bring and tell that story and get folks excited and prove that we can do it, like those make for, fun shop talk.
Yeah, it's an exciting place, an exciting world, and I'm glad we're answering the question, why does social matter to the enterprise? Because I think it does. I don't think that there's a dispute here. I think it's how you utilize that information and what you're going to do with it, how you're going to engage with that client. I'm pretty vocal about meeting the client where the client's at, or and on the platform or on the device that they're wanting to communicate on. And so you enable that and you give all that background information. So very exciting stuff, even for those of us that don't live and breathe on social. It's very important and something to be looked at. And with the help of a company like Sprinkler, companies can take advantage.
Yeah, thanks for the plug, Mike. It's an exciting time for us. We think we've got a great solution, but just as important as what my teammate John Howard calls the hard product is the soft product. Like, the relationship, the support, the ideation, the brainstorming, and that's where, we've built some really strong relationships and we're excited to keep doing it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time here to bring the listeners up to speed on why social matters. And I think we made the point here today, and I'm looking forward to follow-ups and appreciate your help and good luck with Sprinkler.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Mike here. Hope you liked this boardroom session. Please check back to your future sessions as we're recording a new one every month. If you want to reach out, look for me on LinkedIn or send me a note at mike@sidepath.com. That's Mike at sidepath.com.